Imagine standing on a tightrope stretched between two skyscrapers, with the wind howling from both directions. That is exactly what the American political landscape feels like as we head toward the 2026 midterm elections. The margins in Congress are so razor-thin that a shift of just a handful of seats could completely rewrite the trajectory of the country. It is not just a battle for legislative control. It is a high-stakes chess match where every move is calculated to force the opponent into a corner.
That is a perfect image to start with. When you look at the map for 2026, the stakes could not be higher. We are looking at a classic political collision. On one side, you have the sitting administration trying to defend a fragile status quo, and on the other, the shadow of the Trump agenda continuing to reshape the conservative base and mobilize voters. To really understand what is happening, we have to look past the daily headlines and analyze the underlying machinery. We are talking about the strategic missions of both parties, the macro-environmental pressures, and the pure game theory driving their decisions.
And that is precisely what we aim to do here on the New Sentinel. Whether we are dissecting the strategic intricacies of military campaigns, exploring the latest shifts in pop culture, or analyzing a critical election, our goal is to give you a comprehensive, deep-dive understanding of the forces shaping our world. If you want to stay ahead of the curve, make sure to tune in, subscribe, comment, and share your thoughts with us. Now, let us dive into the strategic landscape of 2026. If we look at this through a structured lens, say, the mission and strategies of both parties, what are the core objectives they are trying to achieve?
If we break down their mission, objectives, strategies, and tactics, the division is stark. The Democrats have a clear mission: protect their legislative firewall and prevent a total conservative sweep. Their objective is to hold on to vulnerable Senate seats in swing states and reclaim the House by targeting moderate suburban districts. Their strategy relies on framing the election as a defense of democratic norms and reproductive rights, utilizing highly localized tactics to paint their opponents as out of touch with average families.
On the flip side, the Republican mission is to consolidate power to pave the way for a sweeping legislative agenda. Their objective is to expand their footprint in the Senate and secure a functional majority in the House. The strategy here is deeply tied to nationalizing the race, focusing heavily on economic anxiety, border security, and the legacy of the Trump administration's policies. Their tactics involve aggressive base mobilization and keeping the spotlight on voter integrity issues.
It is a classic clash of political frameworks. But to understand why these strategies are chosen, we have to look at the macro environment. If we apply a pestle analysis, the political and economic factors are particularly volatile right now. Politically, we are seeing unprecedented polarization. Economically, even if inflation stabilizes, the psychological weight of high interest rates and cost of living concerns still dominates voter sentiment. Socially, the electorate is deeply fragmented, with cultural issues driving voter identity more than ever.
And we cannot ignore the technological and legal dimensions of this environment. On the technological front, artificial intelligence and targeted social media algorithms are changing how campaigns communicate, making it easier to micro-target voters, but also raising the risk of widespread misinformation. Legally, the battleground is defined by voting laws. This brings us right to the center of the debate over election integrity versus voter suppression, specifically the fights surrounding legislative efforts like the SAVE Act.
The SAVE Act is a fascinating case study. For those unfamiliar, it stands for the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, which aims to require proof of citizenship to register to vote in federal elections. Now, if we look at this debate through the lens of game theory, we can see why both parties are acting the way they do. It is not just about the policy. It is about the strategic payoffs for each side.
Explain that. How does game theory help us understand the gridlock over voting laws?
Think of it as a strategic game where both players, the Democrats and the Republicans, are trying to maximize their payoffs with their respective bases. For Republicans, championing the SAVE Act is a dominant strategy. The payoff is immense. It signals to their base that they are actively fighting for election integrity, which is a massive motivating factor for voter turnout. Even if the legislation does not pass, the act of fighting for it builds trust with their core voters.
So, for them, the legislative defeat is still a political victory because it reinforces their narrative. What about the Democrats? What is their payoff matrix?
For Democrats, the dominant strategy is strong opposition. They frame the act as a voter suppression tactic designed to create unnecessary hurdles for marginalized communities, students, and low-income voters who might not have easy access to specific documentation. By opposing it, they mobilize their own base, highlighting what they view as an existential threat to voting rights.
It sounds like a Nash equilibrium, where neither side has an incentive to compromise. Both sides gain more by staying locked in their positions and using the conflict to rally their supporters, rather than working toward a middle ground solution that might actually secure elections while keeping them accessible.
Exactly. The payoff for compromise is near zero for both parties in the current climate. Cooperation yields no rewards from a highly polarized electorate. Instead, they choose a path of conflict, because the friction itself generates the heat needed to fuel campaign donations and volunteer energy. It is a rational choice for the politicians, even if it leads to an irrational outcome for the country's trust in the electoral system.
That brings us to the SWOT analysis of the two parties. What are the internal strengths and external threats they are dealing with as they navigate this game?
For the Democrats, their greatest strength is their organizational infrastructure in key swing states and their proven ability to win suburban moderate voters, especially when reproductive rights are on the ballot. Their weakness, however, is a sense of defensive fatigue. They are constantly trying to hold together a highly diverse coalition that ranges from moderate centrists to progressive activists. The threat they face is economic dissatisfaction. If voters feel their wallets are empty, they tend to punish the party associated with the current administration, regardless of the nuances.
And what about the Republicans? What does their SWOT profile look like?
Their strength lies in the sheer enthusiasm of their base and their clear, unified messaging on economic security and border control. They also benefit from the historical trend where the party out of power typically gains ground in midterm elections. However, their weakness is their reliance on highly polarizing figures and agendas, which can alienate moderate independents in critical suburban districts. The threat to them is overreach. If they push too far on social issues or election denial narratives, they risk triggering a backlash among moderate voters who just want stability.
That brings us to the Trump factor. How is his agenda playing with voters as we approach 2026? It seems to act as both a powerful magnet and a significant wedge.
It is the ultimate double-edged sword. On one hand, the Trump agenda is the lifeblood of the Republican base. It represents a promise to disrupt the status quo, secure the border, and put America first economically. For millions of voters, that message is incredibly resonant, especially those who feel left behind by cultural shifts and economic transitions. But on the other hand, it acts as a powerful mobilizer for the opposition. The mere threat of that agenda being fully realized is often enough to drive moderate and progressive voters to the polls in record numbers.
It is like a political gravity well. Everything gets pulled into its orbit. You cannot run a campaign in 2026 without defining yourself in relation to it. If you are a Republican candidate, you need that endorsement and base support, but you also have to worry about how it plays in a purple district. If you are a Democrat, you want to make the entire election a referendum on that agenda, but you risk ignoring the immediate economic concerns of your constituents if you focus on it too much.
It is a delicate balance, and it raises a deeper, almost philosophical question about the nature of our democracy today. Are we moving toward a system where governance is no longer about solving collective problems, but purely about managing strategic brand differences? When every policy proposal, from voting rights to economic relief, is viewed through the lens of game theory and base mobilization, the space for actual policy making shrinks to almost nothing.
It makes you wonder if the system itself is sustainable when the incentives are aligned against cooperation. If the dominant strategy for winning an election is to polarize and conflict, then the very act of governing becomes a liability. The candidate who compromises is punished by their own side, while the candidate who fights to a standstill is rewarded.
That is the tragic loop of modern politics. The real cost of this strategic gridlock is the erosion of public trust. When voters see both sides using critical issues as political footballs, they start to lose faith in the process itself. They begin to view the entire system as a game played by elites, where the rules are rigged and the outcomes do not actually improve their daily lives.
As we look ahead to 2026, the battle for Congress will not just decide which party holds the gavel. It will test whether the current political models can withstand the pressure of a deeply divided nation. Will we see a strategic realignment, or will we simply see a continuation of the same high-stakes gridlock? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain: the strategies deployed over the next 2 years will shape the American landscape for a generation.
It is going to be a fascinating, albeit tense, journey to watch. The moves are being made on the board right now, and every player is calculating their next step.
That brings us to the end of today's deep dive. We hope this analysis has given you a clearer picture of the strategic forces at play as we march toward 2026. Remember, understanding the game is the first step to changing it. Thank you for listening to the New Sentinel. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment with your thoughts on the upcoming midterms, and share this episode with anyone who wants to look beyond the headlines. Until next time, keep analyzing, keep questioning, and stay informed.